Before I make the welcoming remarks, I would just like to ask you to join me in thanking the group that has just given us some few minutes of entertainment. It's that in deciding to devote attention to industrial development, the African Union took into account the fact that the continent has the least developed manufacturing region of the world. As officials working in the sector of industrialization, we really need to be very sad. We need to be sad and unhappy. And we need to be angry. Angry because we have not succeeded to industrialize Africa. So as officials, we need to be able to inform our ministers that we cannot continue the way we are doing in the area of industrialization. The world has left us behind here in Africa. Only a few countries in sub-Saharan Africa have succeeded in developing a sizable and dynamic manufacturing sector above 20% of GDP, which is still very, very low. And if you draw a graph of the GDP, and on that same graph, you interpose the poverty levels, you will find that where we have low figures of GDP, we have very high levels of poverty and low levels of industrialization. So which is why as officials, as experts, we need to be sad, we need to be angry, so that that can provoke us to develop the right strategies. So in order to move forward towards prosperity, Africa needs to take full advantage of new opportunities offered by the globalization of industrial production. The experience of newly industrialized countries, especially in Asia, provides ample evidence of the strong link between industrialization, economic growth, and prosperity. It is industry, together with its related services, that will drive the expansion of economies by spearheading economic growth, nurturing entrepreneurship, creating technological dynamism, fostering productivity, generating employment, and contributing to agricultural productivity. Kenya has developed a sessional paper on industrialization policy framework that will steer Kenya's industrialization efforts up to the year 2030. With those few remarks, ladies and gentlemen, let me once again welcome you to this conference, this meeting, and ask you, all of us, to think hard so that we can come up with clear recommendations that we are going to put before the ministers. I therefore wish to declare this meeting of senior officials in preparation of CAMI-20 officially opened. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cyrus Njiru, very much for this opportunity to represent the ADB here and to discuss with you some of the things we see as ways of enhancing industrialization on the continent and where we should be moving. Industrialization is a challenge that this continent has been facing for some time. And our duty here is to come up with additional proposals to the ministers and subsequently to the states. I say additional because this continent has seen numerous solutions proposed to it over the past decades. These go from the structural adjustment programs of the 70s and 80s to 90s to the other solutions which have been proposed, which are based on countries developing industries in sectors which are state-controlled, neglecting the private sector, and these difficulties all of those proposed solutions have created for the continent. What we need, we believe, is to acknowledge and accept our weaknesses in certain areas, celebrate our comparative advantages in other. Africa is currently predominantly an exporter of primary commodities. And we need to change that. We need to move into beneficiation to add value to those products before we export them. And we can do it. We have the potential in terms of natural resources. We have the potential in terms of human resources. How do we put those together, bring in the financial resources to develop them and move ahead? That is basically our biggest challenge. Because we cannot develop those natural resources and industrialize if we do not have the human resource potential recognized, developed, and maintained on the continent. Maintained on the continent. A couple of years ago, President Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria said that often he has more Nigerian scientists and well-trained human resources in the US and elsewhere than in Nigeria. And this is valid for most African countries. How do we maintain our competent human resources on the continent to make sure that we can add that to the natural resources and the capital requirements to develop the continent and move to industrialization? That is a big challenge for us. We have considerable resources in agriculture, in forestry, in aquaculture and fisheries, mineral resources, energy, and although it might not be considered as a natural resource, I would say tourism. We just saw a group here right now that performed for this meeting with considerable potential, which can be harnessed. Dr. Njiru talked about the cultural potential of this country. That is also supposed to move into industrialization. How do we make sure that those cultural aspects can be harnessed to make sure that the individuals and the Africans involved in those sectors can make a decent living out of that? I was just talking about it with Stephen Karangi here. How do we make sure that those youths can harness that potential?
Engineer Musanik. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Njiro, our PS, Ministry of Industrialization and Enterprise Development, Ms. Amita Misra, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the UN Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, His Excellency Mr. Carlos Lopez, to this senior officials meeting of the 20th CAMI. Mr. Lopez charged me to convey his warmest greetings to all of you. On his behalf, let me also convey our highest appreciation to the government and the people of Kenya for the truly African hospitality they have extended to us, and also the excellent arrangements put in place for this conference, which is jointly organized with AUC, UNIDO, and ECA. I would like to salute this partnership that brings together once again major institutions backing the continent at a time when Africa continues to be marginalized as the least industrialized region of the world. Now, the continent accounts for a negligible share of global industrial output and manufactured exports. Your participation in this meeting is a testimony to the importance that your government and organizations attach to the issue of industrial development in Africa, and I would like to commend your commitment. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite the continent's natural resource endowment, as we heard from the PS and also from Lamin, the lack of meaningful structural economic transformation from an agro-based economy to an industrialized economy has been a primary issue which hampers Africa's development. Notwithstanding progress in some areas and achievements in some countries, African economies today are still, to a large extent, characterized by the preeminence of the low productivity of agricultural and the extractive sectors.
Good morning. Distinguished Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Industrialization and Enterprise Development, Kenya, Mr. Njiru. Distinguished Representative of the African Development Bank, Mr. Mane. Distinguished Director of the Regional of UNECA, Mr. Karingi. Esteemed Director General of the Algerian Ministry of Industry, SMEs and Investment Promotion, Algeria, Mr. Mohammadi. The Distinguished Director of Department of Trade and Industry of the AUC, Ms. Mafanga. I have the honor to address you today in my capacity as the Director of the Bureau of Regional Programs of UNIDO, and I would like to welcome you to this 20th Conference of African Ministers of Industry, which is being held under the theme Accelerating Industrialization in Africa within the Post-2015 Development Agenda. Let me begin by expressing my appreciation to Kenya as the host country for organizing this conference, for the excellent hospitality and welcome that we have seen this morning. We take note of the Permanent Secretary's comments, and I'm sure we will get some time to savor the cultural and other delights that Kenya as a country has to offer. I would also like to express my appreciation to the African Union Commission, and in particular, the Department of Trade and Industry for co-organizing this event and for their continued leadership on industrial development matters. As co-organizers also of this event, UNIDO is pleased to be associated with it. Special appreciation also goes out to the outgoing chair of the CAMI-20 Algeria, under whose leadership a number of key activities were undertaken in order to support industrial development in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, as you might know, CAMI-20 successfully paved the way towards the implementation of the IDA strategy and brought its realization one step forward. For instance, following an IDA internalization workshop hosted and organized for the Regional Economic Commissions by UNIDO, a number of programs were developed by the RECs. Various efforts were also made to transform these into fundable projects, and in cooperation with the African Union Commission, the projects have recently been submitted to the African Development Bank. These projects, which were developed with the assistance of UNIDO, focused on, for instance, some of the topics that have come up and have been referred to this morning even, upgrading and modernizing of productive capacities necessary to propel industrial development, standards and quality infrastructure development to enhance the accessibility of African products into the international market, and investment promotion activities including support of establishment of subcontracting and partnership exchange centers, as well as institutionalization of investment monitoring platforms at the regional level.
7 clusters qu'il est bon de rappeler. Il s'agit de la politique industrielle, de la mise à niveau du système productif et des capacités commerciales, de l'infrastructure et l'énergie. Le 4e cluster, ce sont les ressources humaines. 5e, recherche, développement, innovation. 6e, mobilisation des ressources. Et 7e, développement durable. AIDA a été soumis au sommet des chefs d'État et de gouvernement qui l'ont adopté, en demandant aux ministres d'élaborer dans les meilleurs délais, comme annexe, une stratégie de mise en œuvre et une autre relative à la mobilisation des ressources. La CAMI-19, tenue en mars 2011 à Alger, a adopté les dites annexes relatives à la stratégie de mise en œuvre et à la mobilisation des ressources. Depuis, le bureau de la CAMI-19 a œuvré pour mener, en relation avec les partenaires africains et l'ONUDI, plusieurs actions visant à donner plus de corps au plan AIDA. Cette dynamique s'est traduite par la mise en place du comité de pilotage de l'AIDA. Vous savez que la stratégie de mise en œuvre donne une place centrale aux communautés économiques régionales, ainsi qu'aux banques africaines, qui composent désormais avec le secteur privé africain au sein du comité de pilotage de l'AIDA. Ce comité a été officiellement installé sous la présidence algérienne en mars 2012 à Alger.